Antagonistic is to me not a bad thing to do. I do not have a problem with sitting down with adversaries all over the world.
Okay, let's bring in the Heritage Foundation's Kelsey Bolar. Kelsey, Ted Cruz is saying that Bernie is basically telling Anderson Cooper that Fidel Castro was great, bringing literacy to the people of Cuba. Quote, here's Ted Cruz. It really makes a difference when those you murder at the firing squad can read and write. Your reaction to this?
Ted Cruz is absolutely right. Bernie Sanders has a long record of defending these communist dictators, and now he's saying he'll go and, if he were president, he would be open to forging a personal relationship with them. Well, look, President Trump has done that. I think we have to be fair, but there's a big difference between what President Trump is doing and what Bernie Sanders would do. President Trump is engaging with these brutal dictators that Bernie Sanders is defending by encouraging, doubling down on defense spending and meeting rhetoric with fire and fury. And the question is, what would Bernie Sanders do if any of these personal relationships with brutal dictators went awry? Would he actually use the threat of fire and fury like President Trump has? And I think his track record of wanting to slash defense spending tells us the answer on that.
But the question is, he's acting like an apologist and essentially whitewashing communist Cuba's atrocities in other countries as well. Democrat Donna Shalala is saying that of Bernie. She represents Florida, saying, Bernie, you need to get educated on this murderous tyrant Castro. Take time to speak to some of her constituents in Florida before you sing the praises of Fidel Castro. So Bernie's point that he got people reading, Castro got people reading Cuba. You wonder if Bernie has now lost Florida. And by the way, weren't there other ways to literacy in Cuba besides turning it into a gulag?
Absolutely. These remarks, these defenses of Castro and others are leaving so many Americans, many of them on the left, politically homeless, because these are people who fled Castro's regime. These are people who know the truth of what a communist dictatorship actually looks like. And so when Bernie Sanders goes out and defends this because they have a good literacy program, these people know better. Yeah. They've been there, and it's really defenseless.
To your point, Kelsey, Bernie Sanders has already refused to recognize Venezuela's opposition interim president, Juan Guaido, who stands for freedom, and Bernie refuses to condemn Venezuela's communist dictator Maduro for his atrocities. Watch this.
Do you consider Juan Guaido the legitimate president of Venezuela?
No, I think what has to happen right now, I think there are serious questions about the recent election. There are many people who feel it was a fraudulent election.
Why have you stopped short of calling Maduro of Venezuela a dictator?
Well, I think it's fair to say that the last election was undemocratic. But there are still democratic operations taking place in that country.
Hey, gang, show the scroll of Venezuela's communist atrocities. Nearly 10,000 murdered by the Venezuelan Communist Security Forces since 2018. More than 32,000 protests in Venezuela. 3 million, maybe 4 million have fled. Nearly 13,000 people arrested, arbitrary detention, torture. We've been first in this show to show the world how Venezuelans are eating out of garbage cans under the communist dictatorship. They are literally taking teenagers and handcuffing them to steering wheels, according to our sources in Venezuela, and shooting them in the chest. And more extrajudicial executions by the security forces there. Bernie Sanders is not being held accountable here.
He's not. And look, often on the debate stage, he'll say, oh, no, the policies that I'm talking about are policies that are happening over in Denmark. I'm not talking about what's happening in Venezuela. Well, then look at why is he out there defending Venezuela? These remarks don't add up.
They don't add up. And, thousands of political prisoners, maternal mortality up 2/3, infant mortality up 30%, malaria up 76%. I think just at the end of Chavez's regime and at the start of Maduro. And through Maduro's regime, Bernie Sanders gave a shout out to Hugo Chavez in 2003, Kelsey.
Yes. Again, I think that, the more he becomes the front runner, the more we're going to learn about these very problematic remarks he's had consistently throughout his time as a government official. He is out there defending the most brutal dictators. And again, there are people in Florida, there are people all over this country who have come here to flee these types of regimes, and they are going to be insulted by his defense of them.
Well, you can't win the White House without winning Florida. Kelsey, great to see you.
Great to see you.
Look who's here, Lou Dobbs.